Okay, when you think of weapon and weapon-specific exotics, what comes to mind? Like when you think of sidearms, Mechanier Trick Sleeves, yeah, technically the best for sidearms. Or maybe Lucky Pants in PvE, what comes to mind? The hand cannon, Peacekeepers. Immediately you think of SMGs on a Titan. You catch the drift. So it's an exotic centered around one thing to elevate that thing. It specializes in it. So when you think of a glaive, you think Triton Vice. That comes to mind, or it should come to mind. When Triton Vice came out, I wasn't nice to it at all, but we do have a big change to it, and I wanted to see if it's worth using now. The ins and outs, how it stacks up, and in this updated review with its buff, it's actually going to turn into a different review. It had a lot of issues before. Well, not necessarily issues, but it was lackluster. Super lackluster. Like as an example, when you were surrounded, you dealt 30% more melee damage. That's not even what surrounded the perk gives. So it does less than that. And at the time, Syntheseps dealt 50% more damage when surrounded. The same combat trigger, 3 or more enemies are around, the Syntheseps did 50, the glaive-specific exotic does 30. So off the rip, that's just one example, it wasn't doing enough with its niche. And this was 5 months ago. This got updated, got a buff, Synthos got nerfed, different sandbox, we got some changing things. Triton Vice has some other elements to it, stayed the same, the exotic text, increased glaive reload speed and damage when surrounded, glaive melee final blows overflow around to the magazine, glaive projectile final blows detonate if the glaive deals damage matching your subclass type. With the buff, they increased glaive melee damage when surrounded to 100% for both PvE and PvP, up from 30% and up from 10% in the Crucible. That's a big buff, substantial. The melee is dealing 100% more, it's dealing 2 times damage of what the base does. You're seeing right here, the base is 10,343, and with the perk now on the screen, Halberdier's Reach, 20,685, 2 times damage. And then you can add on and go further with something like Close to Melee, that stacks on top, that's 30%. So from that base, 10,343 goes to 26,890, 160% more. Looking decent, a lot better than it was. So I do want to be clear, at the core, it is a good change, but I still have issues with it. And before I get into that, I do want to talk about those other things on it, like the reload speed while surrounded. It's okay, I guess. You can simulate that with reloaders. The overflow of the magazine is nice. You can bypass that too. Some glaives have overflow. Some glaives have replenishing, like Ecliptic here. Blocking damage partially reloads this weapon from reserves. So yeah, that can be bypassed too. So I guess the kind of standout thing, along with its melee damage, is that little elemental explosion. Final blows with the projectile cause a detonation matching your subclass. It's pretty useful. Maybe you have a solar glaive, maybe you're radiant. Things on the artifact like kindling trigger. Radiant causes solar weapons to apply scorch to unscorched targets. You can pair that with something like Judgment of Kelgaroth with Incandescent. So the things, we have more melee damage, 2 times damage. The reload, can be bypassed. Overflow, bypassed. The explosion, kind of cool. Useful, yes. Necessary, no. Here's my issue. Is it better? Yeah. But to me, the whole goal of the glaive is to stab. I'm here to stab, Bungie. The exotic is made specifically for glaives. It's on a hunter. In the same patch, with the Syntho nerf, they removed the extended melee lunge distance. They reduced the PvE surrounded melee damage to 165% from 200. Now you get improved handling and reload speed while surrounded. They increased glaive melee bonus to plus 100 from 50%. What are we doing here? 100% came from 50%. And also, while surrounded, you get weapon handling and reload speed. So it just basically matches and surpasses what this entire exotic is used for. Synthos used to be 50. Triton Vice 30, now they're both 100. Now they both give reload. Now they're matched at 100. But the worst thing about that, and I started the video with, like, when you think of a sidearm, you think of Mechaniers. When you think of Peacekeepers, you think of SMGs. When you think of glaives, you should be thinking Triton Vice. We'll take 2 scenarios. This one's on Hunter with Triton Vice. You proc Close to Melee, you have Surrounded, maybe get a Tractor Cannon debuff for that maximum stab. You're looking good. 54,207 damage, and the base is 16,038 for a total of 238% more damage, over 3 times the base melee damage. And it isn't done, it can do a little bit more, but that's really, really good, right? I'm gonna come back to this. So let's take this guy. We've all seen this guy, the Banner of War Titan. And yes, Banner of War stacks. So I can go into this same Lost Sector, get a projectile final blow to proc Close to Melee, that also procs Banner of War ×1, go up to the boss, I'm surrounded, just like Triton Vice, hit the Tractor Cannon, it deals 67,759. 323% more damage, over 4 times damage. Banner of War 1. So My issue with this, now to match that, what the hunter has to do is they have to be on Radiant, and they have to be Radiant while doing that. That will be 67,759, just like the Banner of War Titan. But you have to keep Radiant up or have Radiant at that time, either by a Radiant dodge, switching off the glaive to throw a knife to proc Radiant, and then you do your damage. But no matter what, it's not beating a stab and go Banner of War Titan. Because every single time I was using the Hunter, every time I was like, I wish I was on Banner of War Titan. Because with Banner of War Titan, it's like, okay, with the Triton Vice, you get the little extra reload, which Syntheseps can do. You have the little projectile, which is I don't miss it. With Banner of War, I'm doing more damage. Not only that, I'm periodically healing nearby allies and myself. And on Strand, I can pick up an orb and have Woven Mail. So I have the Woven Mail DR, I have the Glaive Shield DR if I need to, and I'm just wailing melee damage. And when you get it all stacked up, I'm talking 80,000+, 90,000 melee hits. Like, that's wild compared to Triton Vice, which to meet that, you have to be on a Radiant Hunter. You can throw healing grenades, I guess, but it doesn't match literally just walking around and meleeing things on Banner of War Titan Syntheseps. It doesn't. So in the end, the Syntheseps was a huge buff to the glaive playstyle, especially with close to melee. And I wanted to make this review, I wanted to get this right because we have a new aggressive glaive with the Dawning, and it also has close to melee. I will talk about that later on in the week or next week. But it's just beyond me that they would match Syntheseps with Triton Vice, and the things you could do with Banner of War on the Strand kit. The super's better. But just everything's better. You don't have to become Radiant. You don't have to do anything special. You just walk into things and glaive them, as you do as a Titan. It's equivalent of just punching things. Getting health, maybe you're getting orbs with better already. You're getting Woven Mail. It's just 1,000 times better. Now, I'm not saying that Triton Vice is horrible, because with what it does, it's good. But as I said, every single time I was on Hunter, it would have been better with Banner of War Titan. Every time. So yeah, to me, it's Yikes 2.0. Because when you think of a glaive, you shouldn't think Syntheseps, you should think Triton Vice. And there's a lot more to this. You could add more to the builds, but on a base level, especially with it giving more melee damage, that's what the glaive should be kind of revolving around. So as you saw in the gameplay, I was using Tractor Cannon to up that damage. Close to melee, upping that damage, things like that. And especially on Banner of War Titan, if something has a stomp mechanic, or they have fire, you have the recovery from Banner of War, you have Woven Mail. And when they do stomp, you can just throw up the Glaive Shield and you're not going to get stomped away. You're just going to eat it. Like, it just works better on the Titan. So yeah, Yikes 2.0, not really happy with it. If Banner of War Titan didn't exist in the current form, yeah, I would have better things to say about it. But since Banner of War Titan does exist, and the Syntheseps do exist with a 100% glaive melee bonus, it's the Syntheseps every time. If you're new here, remember to hit the subscribe button, and if you are subscribed, thank you so much for your support. Let's talk about Triton Vice, or better yet, Syntheseps down below with a glaive. Let's talk about it, and definitely if you get a close to melee Dawning glaive, try it with Syntheseps. I'll talk more about it in a later review. Thank you for watching, and until the next one, I am CoolGuy.